When I was in college, we used to get a group of friends together and we would play a game called Bigger or Better. And so what we would do is we'd break up into teams of 3 or 4 people. We would all start at the same house in the neighborhood, and each team would start with just an ordinary paperclip, right? Something that everybody has in their home or their office. The object of the game was to take that paperclip, okay, and in 1 hour, see who could trade that paperclip to get the biggest and best thing. So here's how it would go. You'd all start the timer, you say go, and everybody would head out and you'd go knock on your neighbor's doors. And when they answer the door, you go up and you say, hey, I have this paperclip. Would you be willing to trade me for something bigger or better? And a lot of times people would be a little bit confused, but usually they would oblige. They'd go back into their house and they'd come out with something that they thought was bigger and better, right? And so it could be an old rusty hammer or a stuffed animal that their kid didn't use, or maybe an old teapot, something of that nature, right? And so you'd take that item, whatever they gave you, and you'd knock on the door of the next house, you knock on the door and say, hey, I have this teapot. Would you be willing to trade me for something bigger or better? And so they'd go back in their house and they'd find something bigger or better to trade you for. And as you can imagine, this process continued until the hour was finished. And then we'd all meet back up at the house to see who had the biggest and best item. Now, it was different every time, but you wouldn't believe the kinds of stuff that people were willing to trade and give away just out of their homes. We ended up with microwaves, golf clubs, couches, bicycles. One year, we even had a group of people come back with an entire dining room table and chairs set. It was crazy, but it was always a blast to see what you could get that was bigger and better. Now, as a disclaimer, I don't recommend that any of you do this. We did this long before there were Ring doorbells and neighborhood watch Facebook groups and all of those things. So please do not go out and do this. I did not tell you that this is something you should engage in. But the point stands to illustrate that in life, we tend to never be satisfied with what we have or where we're at. As human beings, we have this tendency to always want more, right? We have this impulse. We're constantly looking for the next thing that's bigger or better or cooler or shinier or flashier or more exciting, right? Now, whether it's going to a theme park and finding a ride that's taller and faster, more thrilling than the one before, okay? Or you see this with little kids when they trick or treat for Halloween. They're always looking for more candy. I want more, right? Or if it's material things, everyone's looking for the newest iPhone. I want the absolute newest one that has the most features. I can get 3, 4 cameras on my iPhone. That's crazy, right? Sadly enough, people do this with relationships. They say, hey, this person isn't good enough for me. They're not exciting enough for me anymore. I want somebody who's more attractive. I want somebody who's going to make me feel better, right? People do this with addictions. They say, man, this substance, this is no longer good enough. I want a hit of something that's going to make me feel even better than the last. And that tendency to always want more and bigger and better, ultimately, it's a good and healthy and normal impulse, but oftentimes it leads us to dissatisfaction. Today, we're going to continue on the book of Ecclesiastes. We're going to be in chapter 5. Today, we're going to see how Solomon, a man imparted with wisdom from God, reflects on this issue of contentment. You see, Solomon was arguably the richest and the wisest man in the history of Israel, okay? We have entire chapters of the Bible that are dedicated to just telling us about how wealthy he was, how God had given him so much money and so much wisdom that he was unlike any other king before him. And having lived a long life of wealth and prosperity and pain and sorrow, he comes to a realization of how fleeting material things are in our lives. He says, man, you could have all the money in the world. You could have all the fame. You could have all the wealth, all the status, all the glory, but you can't take it with you when you die. You see, the reality of life is that God is sovereign. We talked about that last week. God in his sovereignty, he gives gifts to his people. Okay, but in his sovereignty, he takes those things away just as easily. And the thing about life is that we don't get to decide how God works. We don't decide when God works or with whom God works or in what way God works. You came naked into this world and you'll be naked when you leave. And if you spend your days chasing material things, you are going to end up in darkness and frustration and sickness and anger. And so Solomon's solution to the problem is to be content. Contentment, it's a state of mind. It means that you're at ease. It means that you're satisfied with what you have, you're happy, you're at peace. Because we live in a world where the gifts we receive are out of our control, they're in the hands of a sovereign God, we're only going to enjoy the life that we're given when we're content in him. Right? It's not about the gifts we receive. It's about enjoying him and what he's given us. He is the biggest and best thing that you will ever have. And as you guys go into your small group time this evening, you're going to take a deeper look at this passage and what Solomon has to say about contentment. I challenge you to think about your life. Ask yourself, what are you looking for satisfaction in? Okay, what are the things? They could be achievements. They could be accolades. They could be statuses that you're looking at to obtain in order to feel satisfied. Think about those things, give them up to Jesus, and ask him what it would look like to be content with what he's given you. We'll see you guys next week.